Well, the three theories that I kind of looked at your vignette through were behaviorism and transactional reader response theory and emergent literacy. And the behaviorism that I saw is really what I think is inherent in every classroom, that this is how we go to this place and this is what we do when we get there. And not in the like, when you were asking them questions, you were expecting specific certain answers. They were open-ended questions. So that aspect was not behaviorism, just the routines and such that exist in my classroom too. That is what I saw for behaviorism, because as I said in our previous video, I think that kindergartners, they need a lot of structure and routines are needed. Otherwise, it's got to be just chaos. And I salute you for teaching kids because I couldn't do it. And so then the transactional reader response theory, like your whole lesson was in response to your situation in your classroom with the indoor recess and the kindness and all that. And you let the kids during your read aloud at different points, rather than like, I'm reading, you need to be quiet. You stopped the reading and let them respond and, you know, didn't just ask recall questions, but asked them what they thought and things like that. And then they did the whole turning and talking and responded with that. And then their writing, of course, is a huge reader response, is a response. Yeah. And then we have emergent literacy theory, which your kindergartners writing and letter sound, you know, compatibility and brave spelling and all that stuff. And not what I see in the classroom. So for me, like, I was like, I actually get to see what this theory is kind of like because I don't see that with fourth graders. I see it with some fourth graders, but not a lot of fourth graders.
Much, yeah.
And the other part was that I felt was a lot like emergent literacy was that you were setting up like, this is how you read. You sit with people and you read and you discuss it and you do, you know, this is what it's like when someone sits and reads a picture book with you and you get to see the pictures and point things out. And so like sharing that, and they're exposed to your fluent reading and encouraged to participate. And, you know, I think it was in this class, we talked about, or there was a part about like, when you read a book as an adult, you don't like go build a diorama. Like, I read The Hunger Games and now I'm going to go build a diorama about it. Like, you don't, you talk about it with people. And that's what you were modeling with your students. And so that was like putting them on the lifelong learner reader path. And like the interactions that you had with the kids that spoke, you know, benefited the listeners, benefited the speakers. So just emergent literacy is part of social constructivism, and your classroom is very social, and so those things just go hand in hand. And I think that's what I have. It's been a couple days since I've read the analysis, so I'm going.
Yes, luckily I got home a little earlier. Sorry,
Mhm.
dogs.
Oh no, they're fine.
I got home a little earlier than I had planned, so I was able to kind of refresh my.
Yes.
So,
very good.
Okay, so for your vignette, the first theory I looked at was schema, and I kind of have my notes here too.
Oh, look at you.
So some of the different examples from your vignette that showed schema theory to me was that you were activating their prior knowledge, recalling that information that you guys had previously talked about and discussed in previous classes. And one of the specific examples was getting them to think of the word perspective and what that meant, and seeing what they could recall from what they had already learned. They had their notes to access, and you were, doing a great job of scaffolding your lesson and kind of building upon for your kiddos. And you guys were, lost my place.
Okay.
Before reading new material, you were making those prior connections from what you've already read, what you've already discussed, kind of pulling out the important points of what you've done. You had that the explicit instruction. You were using read aloud. And I also mentioned the graphic organizers as a way to help them organize their information and to help make connections from previous stuff to new things as you guys were getting ready to read an article. And the second lens I took a look at your classroom with was socio-cultural historical theory. And so looking at your classroom through a social aspect. So looking at how the social interaction in your classroom is used to make meaning. So you led a lot of discussions, and the students were able to discuss with you. You were kind of guiding the discussion as they were giving input and sharing out their thoughts and what they were learning. And through that social interaction, they're able to make meaning from the conversations between each other. And I think as with all classes, you have those that are, a lot more experienced in that social interaction and that collaborative learning than others. And so those that maybe aren't as good or as comfortable with it can kind of learn from their peers as they do that. So, you can just really tell that you value their input and the collaboration that they give out. So also with that, there's a lot of teacher modeling and peer modeling going on. You're providing your students lots of opportunities to talk, which helps them develop and change through the process of learning, and which will come in handy as they get older and eventually get to college, and hopefully later on the job environment, and being able to be a good team player at work and also within their communities. So, and using authentic literature, you had some mentor texts that you were using to model, and reinforcing the vocabulary and academic language that kids are going to need in the school setting. And finally, I looked at your classroom through multi-literacies and new literacies theory. And what got me to think of that lens is just looking at your use of technology in the classroom and kind of getting away from that one-size-fits-all teaching style from what I would consider the old days, I guess. And really pulling in things that the kids would be familiar with. I mean, kids are familiar with a lot of technology these days. Smartboard was used in the classroom. They, are familiar with that. using the movie trailer. You know, that I think would also interest the kids a lot more than, you know, just using text. So that being able to pull that in. And you even had mentioned in one of our conversations that some of the kids then went out and saw the movie. So it's neat to hear them, you know, for you to discuss how they came back and talked about that, relating it to the reading. So that was really neat. And one of the things I liked with that movie trailer piece is that you were able to lead that discussion on how the character was portrayed in a different way, and tying that into when you guys were talking about perspectives and how not all perspectives are going to be the same, and you know, why do you think they would portray him this way, and I think that's my analysis. So it was a joy to hear from a different grade level, and
I agree.
Different, you know, I'm used to these kids that need so much guidance, and it's cool to hear about kids and the things that they're doing a few years down the road, and how you kind of get to take more of a guidance role.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and then to see that all those routine. Oh, sorry, I thought it froze again. I was like, no, not kicking me off. But like all the routines and things that you guys teach them in kindergarten, and getting them into, this is what it means to be at school. This is, and to see it does come to fruition, and they are eventually able to work on their own and stuff. It's like, the time you guys put in so much.
We sure try.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and as far as, I think the other thing was like extensions or advice. And I know we had talked in one of our discussions, and I had wondered if you were going to have the kids write their own version of the story or something. And I think that was the only thing I was able to come up with, because it was a very solid, and it was, you know, it's the beginning of what, like something that was going to take more than one day. And so that was the only like suggestion that I could come up with.
Yeah. Yes, and I thought that would be a really cool one. I had thought of, in terms of the multi-literacy, new literacies, how neat it would be for your kids to do something technology related, you know, whether on the computer or making their own little video or something, or some type of, you know, how would they portray a character? I thought that would be kind of neat to see, because I think so often kids can do things that I can't. I mean, I feel like I'm pretty decent with technology, but sometimes there's so much more with it, you know,
there is.
Younger generation. And I think it would be really cool to kind of see what they could create.
Yes, that does sound, that would be really, that's something I would eventually like to do. And I hadn't thought about it, combining it with this unit that we're working on, but it would be a perfect, while we're talking about perspective, kind of way, like how would you portray this person and what stood out to you? So I may be tweaking that and putting that in somewhere. That's a good thought, though.
Yeah, I think sometimes I think I have a couple kindergartners. I think that could be pretty creative, you know, but that's something it's like, oh, so many of my kids can't do that yet, and I'm not sure I'm skilled showing them how to do that, you know, but that would be really cool. And I hadn't thought of that until I thought of it yesterday, I think. Oh, they can come up with some pretty amazing things.
Yeah. And I'm sure it would just blow me away, like the things that they think of anyway. But then if they had access to this technology that they could manipulate better than a piece of paper and a pencil and a crayon. And so, yeah, I'm intrigued. work on that.